Tempest in Teyvat, Rimuru's Elemental Odyssey by KabirSingh808. The Slime's Promise. Just as Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon were discussing their recent dealings, a knock echoed through the wooden door of their resting quarters. Rimuru, sensing no hostility from the visitor, casually called out, "Come in." The door creaked open, revealing Garo, one of the trusted warriors of Watatsumi Island. His blue and white armor reflected the dim lantern light, and his expression remained serious yet respectful as he stepped inside. His sharp eyes briefly scanned the group before he addressed them. "Her Excellency has concluded her discussions with the authorities," Garo informed them. "She wishes to meet you now to finalize the agreement." Paimon blinked in surprise. "Huh, that was fast," she exclaimed. "I thought these kinds of talks took forever." Garo crossed his arms. "Since this is an important and large-scale deal, Her Excellency made sure to handle everything efficiently. She doesn't like to leave matters unresolved for too long." Rimuru smirked slightly, impressed by Kokomi's efficiency. "A wise leader. I like that." He stretched a little before turning to Ether and Paimon. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go." The trio quickly prepared themselves, following Garo out of the building and into the cool evening air of Watatsumi Island. The sky was painted with shades of deep blue and violet, stars beginning to twinkle above as the sea shimmered in the moonlight. The path leading to Sangonomiya Shrine was lined with glowing coral formations, casting a soft, otherworldly light around them. As they walked, Paimon couldn't help but ask, "So what exactly did Kokomi discuss with the authorities?" Garo kept his gaze forward as he explained, "Her Excellency negotiated terms regarding trade, military cooperation, and resource distribution. The Shogunate's reforms have left certain regions in a delicate state, and ensuring Watatsumi's stability is her top priority. Now, she wants to confirm everything with you before proceeding." Ether hummed in understanding. "She really thinks ahead, huh?" Rimuru nodded. "That's how a ruler should be. Careful, but decisive." Paimon, however, puffed out her cheeks. Sounds like a lot of serious stuff. Can't we skip to the part where everything is signed, and we go celebrate with food?" Rimuru chuckled at her antics. "Patience, Paimon. The more thorough we are now, the less trouble we'll have later." After a short climb up the shrine steps, the grand structure of Sangonomiya Shrine came into view. Built atop cascading waterfalls, the shrine gleamed under the moonlight, its intricate coral designs making it look more like an extension of the island itself rather than a man-made structure. Lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their soft glow adding to the serene atmosphere. At the entrance, Kokomi stood waiting, her calm and composed expression making it clear she had been expecting them. Her pale blue eyes met theirs as she offered a small, polite smile. "I appreciate you coming so quickly," she said in her soft, measured tone. "Please, follow me inside. We have much to discuss." Rimuru exchanged glances with Ether and Paimon before nodding. "All right, let's settle this." With that, they stepped into the shrine, ready to finalize the agreement and prepare for what lay ahead. After a long and exhausting discussion inside the shrine, the group finally stepped outside. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over Watatsumi Island, illuminating the coral-colored structures and shimmering waters in the distance. The salty breeze rustled through the trees, bringing a moment of peace after the intense negotiations. Paimon, hovering slightly lower than usual, groaned dramatically. Paimon never thought talking so much could be this tiring. Ether raised an eyebrow. "You didn't even do anything except listen and float around." Paimon huffed, crossing her arms. "Hey," Paimon contributed. "I gave my opinions every now and then." Yeah, whatever you say," Ether replied, shaking his head with a small chuckle. Rimuru, walking beside them with a bundle of parchment in hand, smiled at their antics. All right, no fighting. We still have a lot to do." With a flick of his wrist, the finalized agreement disappeared into his personal storage. As he turned, he saw Kokomi and Garo approaching, both wearing expressions of relief. It was clear that settling everything with the island's authorities had been a difficult but necessary process. "So, where do you want to place the gates?" Rimuru asked, shifting into a more business-like tone. Kokomi, deep in thought, folded her arms. "One should be placed here at the shrine," she decided. "It will ensure that our officials and strategists can monitor it properly. As for the second, Buro village would be the best location." It's our largest residential area, so having easy access to resources there would be invaluable. Rimuru nodded in agreement. Makes sense. Then let's get started. As they reached the shrine's entrance, Rimuru took a moment to focus. Seal, begin the process. Understood, Master. Lifting his right hand, a small sphere of pulsing energy materialized in his palm. It radiated a deep blue glow, similar to Rimuru's original power, but infused with additional stabilizing properties. As he extended his other hand, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. A large circular platform began to emerge, forming from the very stone beneath the shrine. The structure expanded outward, the surface smoothing itself into an intricate design resembling ancient runes woven together. At its center, a perfectly crafted indentation formed, clearly meant to hold the energy sphere. Gasps of awe came from the gathered onlookers, soldiers, shrine maidens, and village elders who had gathered to witness the event. Once the structure was complete, Rimuru calmly placed the sphere into its designated slot. The moment it touched the indentation, the entire platform pulsed with energy, causing faint golden lines to spread across its surface like veins of liquid light. The air shimmered with a faint hum of power, signifying the device had been activated. Turning to the others, Rimuru dusted off his hands. It's done. Paimon blinked at the glowing mechanism. Ah, what exactly is that thing? She asked, pointing at it suspiciously. Rimuru smirked. This is a teleportation mechanism I developed. It serves as a stable gateway to my personal dimension. Kokomi's eyes widened slightly. Your personal dimension? Yep. Rimuru crossed his arms. It's a controlled space that I created. Ether, Paimon, you've seen how my storage works, right? Ether and Paimon nodded. Yeah. He stepped up to the device and pressed a button on its surface. Instantly, energy surged through the structure. Above the platform, a swirling portal began to take form, slowly expanding outward. The colors shifted from deep blue to a golden hue, stabilizing as it reached its final size, large enough to fit an entire house. The sight left the onlookers speechless. The portal pulsed with an inviting glow, but the vast unknown beyond its threshold made some hesitate. Without hesitation, Rimuru stepped forward and disappeared into the portal. Paimon, though still skeptical, grabbed Ether's sleeve. We're going in, right? Ether smirked. You're the one who didn't want to be left behind. With a reluctant sigh, Paimon followed Ether as they stepped through. Kokomi and Guro, along with the other onlookers, exchanged glances. Some were apprehensive about stepping into an unknown space. However, before their doubts could solidify, Rimuru's head suddenly popped back out of the portal. Come on, it's safe, he assured them before disappearing inside again. Kokomi exhaled softly, giving Guro a reassuring nod. Let's go. Together, they stepped into the unknown. The moment they emerged on the other side, their eyes widened in sheer amazement. Above them stretched a sky so clear and blue that it looked almost surreal, with a golden sun hanging high, casting its warmth across the vast landscape. The air was crisp and refreshing, untainted by the usual humidity of the outside world. Endless fields of fertile land stretched out before them, the soil rich and well prepared. A river flowed gently nearby, its water crystal clear, reflecting the sky like a flawless mirror. In the distance, faintly glowing markers indicated planned sections for agricultural development. This, Kokomi murmured, looking around in awe. This place is remarkable. It's a self-sustaining dimension, Rimuru explained, stepping beside her. I created this space to be completely controlled. The land here is limited, but it provides more than enough resources for Watatsumi Island. Guro walked toward the river's edge, kneeling as he cupped some water in his hands. He took a hesitant sip, eyes widening. This is real, fresh water. Rimuru grinned, summoning a glass and handing it to him. Yup, everything here is real, just created artificially. Kokomi turned to Rimuru and bowed deeply. Thank you, Rimuru. What you've provided is invaluable. Watatsumi Island will never forget this. Rimuru waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about it, this helps me too. The moment the group stepped out of the shimmering portal and back into the sacred grounds of Sangonomiya Shrine, they were immediately surrounded by a crowd of concerned villagers, shrine maidens, and Watatsumi soldiers. Their faces were filled with curiosity and concern, their gazes flickering between Kokomi and the mysterious glowing device embedded into the platform at the shrine's entrance. Kokomi-sama. A shrine maiden rushed forward, worry evident in her voice. Are you alright? What happened in there? A few soldiers instinctively placed their hands on their weapons, eyeing Rimuru cautiously, unsure of what had transpired within the portal. Kokomi, ever the composed divine priestess, offered a gentle smile to reassure them. I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about, she said, her voice soothing and calm. Everything went smoothly. The tension in the air eased slightly, but the curiosity remained. The gathered crowd couldn't help but glance at Rimuru, whose relaxed posture contrasted with the air of mystique surrounding him. Turning towards him, Kokomi asked, "Now then, Rimuru, you mentioned that there was something else you wanted to explain regarding the mechanism." Rimuru nodded. Right. Before I'd placed the core into the center of this platform, you probably noticed the button I pressed. Kokomi gave a thoughtful nod. Yes, I remember. That's the power switch, Rimuru explained, tapping the device lightly. If it's turned off, no matter what you do, the portal won't activate. This is the first layer of security. The surrounding villagers listened intently, some whispering amongst themselves as they marveled at the strange yet powerful technology. But that's not all, Rimuru continued, holding up a finger. Once powered on, this mechanism also has a built-in voice recognition system. Kokomi's brows raised slightly in intrigue. Voice recognition. Yep, only authorized individuals can activate the portal using voice commands, Rimuru clarified. For example, to open a portal, you simply say, "Portal open." The gathered crowd gasped at the simplicity and ingenuity of the system. Paimon hovered forward, eyes wide. Wait, hold on a second. You're saying you can just say a phrase, and a giant portal will appear? That's crazy. How does that even work? Ether crossed his arms, nodding in agreement. That level of technology is unheard of in Teyvat. You're telling me this thing doesn't require a vision or any form of elemental energy to operate? Rimuru chuckled at their reactions. Nope. It runs entirely on my energy, which is why I had to install the core myself. Kokomi's mind was already racing, processing the implications. If such technology existed elsewhere, it could revolutionize transportation across Teyvat. Rimuru grinned. Exactly. And that's why I had to set limitations on it. Kokomi gave him a curious look. Limitations. Rimuru nodded, gesturing toward the device. First off, this portal system only works within Watatsumi Island. You can't use it to travel to Inazuma City or any other nation, it's strictly for local transport. The villagers murmured amongst themselves, some relieved that the device wouldn't fall into the hands of outsiders. Second, Rimuru continued, the portal's size and placement can be adjusted by authorized users. You can say something like, set portal size to 2 meters in height and 1 meter in width, and it'll resize itself accordingly. Kokomi's eyes gleamed with understanding. That means we can control how large or small it appears, depending on the situation. Rimuru nodded approvingly. Exactly. You can also relocate the portal by saying something like, open the portal 10 meters to my left. There was a collective gasp of astonishment from the villagers. Guro, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. That's incredible. We could use this to transport supplies efficiently, evacuate people in an emergency, or even help fishermen quickly return to shore. Kokomi gave a thoughtful nod, already envisioning the possibilities. However, after a moment of silence, she asked a more serious question. But, what if someone were to steal this device? It's clearly powerful. If it were taken or misused, it could pose a threat. Rimuru smirked, as if expecting the question. You don't have to worry about that. He patted the core embedded in the platform. Once it's placed in this slot, no one can remove it. Paimon blinked. What do you mean? To put it simply, Rimuru explained, this thing is completely immovable once it's set. And if someone even tries to take it out. He walked toward the mechanism, placing both hands on the core. The moment he made a pulling motion. Beezit. A deafening, high-pitched alarm blared across the entire island, so loud that even those at the far edges of Watatsumi could probably hear it. The villagers clamped their hands over their ears, startled by the sudden sound. Some of the soldiers immediately reached for their weapons, their instincts kicking in, until Rimuru casually spoke, "Stop." The alarm immediately fell silent. The eerie stillness that followed only amplified the awe written across everyone's faces. Kokomi exhaled, placing a hand over her heart. That was certainly effective. Rimuru grinned. Yeah, if anyone tries to tamper with it, the alarm will keep blaring until an authorized user tells it to stop. Pretty handy, huh? Goro scratched his head. That's an understatement. I think everyone on the island just heard that. Rimuru laughed. Exactly the point. Kokomi took a deep breath, regaining her composure. All right then, if I already have authorization, I suppose I should test it myself. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. Portal open. A shimmering blue portal materialized before her, identical to the one from earlier. The villagers gasped in astonishment. She then issued another command. Size should be 2 meters in height and 1 meter in width. Before their eyes, the portal shifted, shrinking and refining itself to the exact dimensions she had requested. She continued, move the portal 10 meters to my left. Instantly, the portal vanished and reappeared precisely 10 meters away. The crowd was utterly mesmerized. Kokomi turned toward Rimuru, a smile gracing her lips. This will change everything for our people. She then bowed deeply. On behalf of all of Watatsumi Island, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done. Please allow us to formally express our gratitude. Rimuru waved a hand dismissively. Please, don't mind that. I'm just glad I could help. The villagers, soldiers, and shrine maidens looked at Rimuru with newfound admiration. Watatsumi Island had just taken a massive step toward a brighter future, and it was all thanks to Rimuru Tempest. As the moon cast its gentle glow over the serene waters of Watatsumi Island, Kokomi turned to Rimuru one last time, her expression thoughtful. There are still a few things I'd like to clarify about the device, she said, her voice calm but curious. Rimuru nodded. Of course. Ask away. She took a deep breath. You mentioned that the mechanism has an energy-based security system, but what if it malfunctions? Or worse, what if an external force attempts to tamper with it? Can we override the system manually? Rimuru crossed his arms, his gaze steady. Good question. The mechanism is designed with several fail-safes. First, as I showed earlier, if someone tries to remove it by force, it will trigger a loud alarm that can be heard across the island. Second, only authorized users, currently, you, can command it to open or close a portal. Even if someone somehow bypassed the alarm, they wouldn't be able to activate it without your voice command. Third, in the rare case of a system error, I've included a reset function. Just say, override and reset, and the mechanism will reboot to its original state. No external force can override it unless they have access to your voice signature. Kokomi placed a hand on her chin, nodding in approval. That's incredibly thorough. I feel much more at ease knowing that this system is foolproof. With that, their business on the shrine was concluded. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon bid their farewells, with the Watatsumi people watching them go with gratitude in their eyes. The journey back to their lodging was peaceful. The cool night air carried the scent of the sea, and the distant sound of waves lapping against the shore provided a soothing background melody. The sky, a vast canvas of deep blue, was dotted with shimmering stars, their glow reflected in the gentle ripples of the ocean. As they arrived at their temporary home, the wooden doors creaked slightly as Rimuru slid them open. Inside, the soft lighting from paper lanterns cast a warm, golden hue over the simple yet cozy room. The futons were neatly arranged, and a small incense burner released a calming scent into the air. Ether sighed in relief as he sat down, stretching his arms. Well, that was definitely something. Paimon, who had been floating beside them the entire time, landed gently on the futon and crossed her arms. You're telling me? Just imagine the money we could have made if we sold those teleportation devices. Her eyes sparkled with the thought. Rimuru chuckled, shaking his head. Don't get carried away, Paimon. We're already making a solid income from the novels I've been publishing. Ether leaned back on his hands, smirking. Yeah, those books really took off, didn't they? Rimuru nodded. Of course. If I wanted to, I could probably become the richest person in Teyvat, but that's not really my goal. Paimon let out an exaggerated sigh. HMPH. I guess that's true. But still, so much more. Ether shifted the conversation. So, what's next? We still haven't met with the Raiden Shogun. The mention of Inazuma's ruler brought a momentary pause. Rimuru, however, remained completely unfazed. "Ah, don't worry about that. It's just a matter of time. She'll invite us herself soon enough." Ether's brows furrowed in confusion. "Huh, what do you mean? You literally fought her and ended up tying with her. Plus, we're openly opposing the Vision Hunt decree. Do you really think she'd want to see us?" Paimon flailed her arms. "Yeah, if anything, wouldn't she see us as troublemakers?" Rimuru simply smiled. "Just trust me. Everything will work out." Ether let out a deep sigh. "You sure are confident." Paimon groaned, floating onto her back. "Whatever. Let's just focus on what really matters, like dinner." Rimuru smirked. "I was waiting for that." With a simple snap of his fingers, a large wooden table materialized before them, filled with a magnificent spread of food. The rich aroma of freshly cooked dishes filled the room, making Ether and Paimon's stomachs growl involuntarily. Their eyes widened at the sight: succulent roasted meat, steaming bowls of rice, perfectly seasoned vegetables, and golden brown pastries, each dish carefully prepared to perfection. The lantern light reflected off the glossy glaze of a sweet teriyaki dish, while the scent of warm bread filled the air. Paimon's eyes practically turned into stars. Whoa. Where did all this come from?" Rimuru grinned. "Even though my powers are still sealed, Seal can still cook. And I promise you, this will be the best meal you've ever had." Paimon barely even listened, already grabbing a plate. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's dig in." Ether chuckled, picking up his chopsticks. "I won't argue with that." They sat around the table, the warmth of the food matching the warmth in their laughter. The worries of the past days faded as they indulged in their meal, savoring every bite. The sound of chopsticks clinking against plates, the occasional exclamation of delight from Paimon, and the comfortable chatter between friends made the room feel more alive than ever. Outside, the night continued in peaceful silence, the moonlight casting silver reflections over the distant sea. After some time, the last of the dishes had been cleared, and fatigue settled over them like a gentle blanket. Ether lay back on the futon, his arms behind his head, staring up at the wooden ceiling. Rimuru followed suit, lying comfortably beside him, his mind drifting as he listened to the gentle breeze outside. Paimon, however, made herself comfortable right in the middle. "All right, time for some well-earned beauty sleep." The soft rustling of blankets and the distant chirping of crickets filled the room as the lanterns dimmed. The warm glow of the embers in the incense burner flickered softly, releasing a calming fragrance that lulled them into relaxation. Slowly, the light in the room faded as the last candle was extinguished, leaving only the gentle shimmer of moonlight filtering through the window. The long day had come to an end, but the future still held many unknowns. Whatever awaited them next, one thing was certain: together, they would face it head-on. As the night deepened, sleep finally claimed them, their breathing soft and even. The adventure was far from over. The golden hues of dawn painted the wooden interiors of the small inn, casting a warm glow through the window. The scent of fresh morning air mixed with the lingering aroma of yesterday's rain, creating a peaceful ambiance. Ether stirred awake, blinking as his golden eyes adjusted to the morning light. He took a slow breath, stretching out his arms as he glanced around the room. Paimon was still curled up beside him, floating slightly above the mattress, softly snoring. Her small frame rose and fell rhythmically, completely lost in her dreams. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes before realizing something: Rimuru was gone. Ether's eyes scanned the room, but there was no sign of the slime-turned human. His bed remained untouched, but the distant clatter of dishes and the rich aroma of sizzling food suggested where he might be. "Hey, wake up. It's morning already," Ether said, nudging Paimon gently. Paimon groaned, burying her face deeper into the pillow. 5 more minutes," she mumbled sleepily. Ether smirked. "Rimuru's making breakfast. That did the trick." Paimon's eyes snapped open as she jolted upright, her wings fluttering in excitement. "Breakfast? Why didn't you say so sooner?" Ether chuckled as Paimon hurriedly rubbed her eyes and floated toward the washbasin. Just as they began their morning routine, the door slid open with a soft creak. Standing there, holding a frying pan, was Rimuru. He had his usual relaxed expression, his sapphire blue eyes scanning the room before settling on them. "Good, you're up," Rimuru said casually before turning on his heel and heading back toward the kitchen. Ether and Paimon exchanged glances before hurrying to get ready, the anticipation of breakfast fueling their movements. After a satisfying meal, the trio stepped out of the inn, the crisp morning breeze greeting them. The sun had fully risen, casting soft golden rays across the landscape, making the dew-covered grass shimmer like scattered gemstones. The village was already lively. Merchants arranged their goods, farmers tended to their crops, and children played along the dirt paths. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon made their way toward the portal site, where the villagers were gradually being transported. As they arrived, they saw an orderly procession. Villagers, holding simple belongings, lined up as they were guided through the shimmering portal under the watchful eyes of Watatsumi soldiers. Standing at the front, overseeing the process, was Guro. His ears twitched slightly as he noticed their approach. He turned, giving a firm nod of greeting. "Good morning, Rimuru, Ether, Paimon." "Morning, Guro," Rimuru responded. "How's everything looking?" "Smooth so far," Guro replied. "The villagers have started settling into their new farmland, and morale remains high. It's an efficient transition." Rimuru nodded approvingly. "That's great. We're making good progress." Just then, a soldier sprinted toward them, his breathing slightly ragged. His expression was tense as he saluted Guro before speaking. "Sir, Kuju Sara and members of the Kuju clan have arrived. They're requesting to meet Mr. Rimuru and his group." The air grew heavier. Guro's expression darkened slightly, his tail bristling. "Are they here for an arrest?" he asked cautiously. The soldier hesitated before shaking his head. "No, sir. They claim to have a message for him." Guro narrowed his eyes. "A message? From whom?" The soldier took a breath. "From the Raiden Shogun." A murmur ran through the surrounding soldiers. Tension crackled in the air like a brewing storm. Guro's jaw tightened. What could she possibly want now? "Looks like it's time," Rimuru said smoothly, an amused smile tugging at his lips. Ether folded his arms. "So she finally decided to call us." Rimuru nodded. As expected. Guro's ears flattened slightly as he exhaled sharply. "This could be a trap. Are you sure about this?" Rimuru smirked. "If it is, I'll just turn the tables on them." Seeing Rimuru's confidence, Guro sighed. "All right. Just be careful." At the meeting point, Kuju Sara stood tall, her disciplined stance unwavering. Behind her, several Kuju clan soldiers stood at attention. The Watatsumi guards kept a wary eye on them, their hands resting on their weapons. As Rimuru's group arrived, Sara's sharp amber eyes locked onto him. "Greetings, traveler from another world," she addressed Rimuru formally. "I bring a message from the Raiden Shogun." The soldiers around them stiffened at the name. A few murmured in concern. "You expect us to believe that?" One of the Watatsumi guards scoffed. "How do we know this isn't a setup?" Another demanded. "Yeah, Rimuru saved us. There's no way we're letting him go with you." Sara remained calm despite the hostility, but Rimuru stepped forward, raising a hand to silence them. "It's fine," he reassured, his voice calm yet firm. "I know what I'm doing." "But Rimuru," one of the soldiers tried again. "I'll return unharmed," Rimuru promised. The soldiers hesitated but, ultimately, they trusted his judgment. Sara watched the exchange quietly before folding her arms. "You're surprisingly confident. Aren't you worried this could be a trap?" Rimuru smirked. "Even if it is, I have my ways." Sara arched a brow. "Such as?" Rimuru simply grinned. Now, everyone has their secrets." She sighed. "Fine. We'll be taking the boats back to Inazuma City. Follow." "Who said we're taking boats?" Rimuru interrupted. Sara frowned. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Rimuru extended his hand toward her. Sara eyed it suspiciously. "What are you?" "Just take it," Rimuru said nonchalantly. After a brief hesitation, she sighed and grasped his hand. In the blink of an eye, a ripple of energy surrounded them. The world twisted for a moment, colors blending like liquid before solidifying again. When they regained their footing, they found themselves standing at the grand entrance of Tenshukaku, the Raiden Shogun's domain. Sara blinked, momentarily stunned. That was unexpected. Rimuru stretched lazily. "Convenient, right?" Sara exhaled sharply before regaining her composure. "Next time, inform me before doing something like that." Duly noted, Rimuru chuckled. Sara shook her head before turning toward the imposing doors of Tenshukaku. "Follow me. The Raiden Shogun awaits." Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon followed Kuju Sara through the grand halls of Tenshukaku. The air inside was heavy with an air of authority, a silent force pressing down upon them. The polished wooden floors reflected the flickering lanterns that lined the halls, casting long shadows that danced with every step. Sarah walked with a disciplined stride, her posture straight as she led them into the main chamber. As they entered, the air shifted, becoming charged with a quiet yet undeniable pressure. There, standing at the far end of the room, was the Raiden Shogun herself, A. Her violet eyes glowed faintly, her expression unreadable as she regarded them with a mixture of caution and silent scrutiny. Dressed in her elegant yet formidable purple dress, she exuded the overwhelming presence of a ruler who had long since removed herself from mortal concerns. Kuju Sarah stepped forward and knelt briefly. "Glory to the almighty Shogun," she declared with unwavering reverence. Then, rising to her feet, she turned to A. "Shogun-sama, just as you requested, I have completed my task." A gave a small nod, her voice smooth yet firm. "Good. You may return to your other duties." Sarah bowed low before taking her leave, exiting the chamber without hesitation. As the doors slid shut behind her, a heavy silence settled over the room. The shogun's gaze locked onto Rimuru first, then shifted briefly to Ether and Paimon. "So, I am assuming you are Rimuru," she said, her tone even, "and your companion here is the blonde traveler." Rimuru nodded, his expression calm. "Indeed, you are correct." A studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Well then, come to the plain of Eutimia. We have much to discuss." Rimuru's mind instantly recalled what happened to Ether when he first faced the Raiden Shogun, the battle where he nearly lost his life. So, this was where she had sent him back then. He gave a nod of agreement, and in an instant, the world around them shifted. A strange sensation washed over Rimuru and his companions as the scenery around them melted away. The physical world faded into an endless void of violet hues and swirling, ethereal light. It was a domain untouched by time, a realm of absolute stillness. However, they weren't alone. Standing before them were two figures. The first was A. She wore a traditional purple kimono, exuding an air of calm authority. Beside her, with an amused glint in her fox-like eyes, stood Miko. The shrine maiden's lips curled into a knowing smile as she took in the sight of the new arrivals. The moment she saw her, Paimon floated forward in surprise. Miko, what are you doing here?" Miko chuckled, her voice dripping with mischief. "Oh, just here to assist in negotiations, and, of course, to listen to some intriguing thoughts from a certain someone." She turned her gaze toward Rimuru, her playful smirk deepening. Rimuru tilted his head slightly. "Well now, since we're all here, let's begin, shall we?" At that moment, a low hum resonated through the plain of Eutimia, and a table materialized between them. It was a simple yet elegant piece, accompanied by 4 seats. A silently took her seat, Miko gracefully sat beside her, while Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon took their places on the other side. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Rimuru turned his attention to Miko first. "So, did you do the task I asked of you?" Miko flicked a strand of her hair behind her ear, her expression smug. "Who do you think I am? Of course, I did my part properly." Rimuru gave a small nod, satisfied with her response. However, A's violet gaze narrowed slightly. "So, you were planning to interfere from the start," she said, her tone calm but edged with quiet scrutiny. Rimuru leaned back slightly. "You could say that, but it's not as if we have any ill intentions. We only wanted you to see for yourself the suffering that the Vision Hunt decree has caused the people of Inazuma." A remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "You ask me to reconsider, yet you do not understand the full picture." Rimuru met her gaze steadily. "Then help me understand, what is it that makes eternity so important to you?" A exhaled softly, her eyes darkening slightly as she gazed into the endless violet void around them. "I have seen what progress can bring," she murmured. "I have seen people strive to break free from their limits, only to lose everything in the end. The heavenly principles do not tolerate such change. In the end, those who reach too far are destroyed." Her words carried a weight that made even Ether pause. Miko, however, let out a quiet sigh. "Even if your reasoning is correct, your method is flawed. By enforcing the Vision Hunt decree, you are stripping people of their freedom and their ambitions. Is that truly the eternity you desire?" A turned her gaze toward Miko. "I know that, but can I truly ignore the possibility of destruction?" Miko's expression softened for a brief moment, but then she smirked as she turned her gaze toward Rimuru. Well, it seems my words aren't enough to sway her. I wonder if you'll do any better, Mr. Rimuru. Rimuru chuckled. So, you're giving up already. It's a little disappointing that even you couldn't persuade your own friend. Miko's eye twitched slightly. Oh, and you think you can do better? Rimuru leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. Guess we'll find out. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? A heavy silence settled in the plain of Eutimia as Rimuru leaned slightly forward, looking directly at A. So, from what I understand, he began, you said that you have seen a nation push forward in progress, only to lose everything to the heavenly principles. A gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. Rimuru narrowed his eyes slightly. In other words, you're talking about Kyanria, aren't you? At the mention of the fallen nation, a flicker of emotion passed through A's gaze, but she did not deny it. Yes, she admitted. Rimuru exhaled softly, tapping a finger against the table. I see. If your goal is to protect your people from them, then I can help you with that. The moment those words left his mouth, both A and Miko's eyes widened slightly in shock. Even Ether and Paimon stiffened at the unexpected statement. Miko was the first to recover, though her tone was sharp with curiosity. What exactly are you trying to say, Rimuru? Rimuru met her gaze calmly. I'm saying that I can protect both you and the people of Inazuma from the heavenly principles, should they ever try to erase you like they did with Kyanria. A's brows furrowed slightly as she studied him. I might sound rude, but, are you joking right now? Rimuru shook his head. Of course not. Why would I joke about something so serious? Miko's expression remained skeptical, but her eyes gleamed with intrigue. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Rimuru gave a casual shrug. Well, to put it simply, if the heavenly principles ever try to destroy Inazuma, I'll just eat it. Ether and Paimon, who had already witnessed his capabilities before, immediately understood what he meant. Oh, I see, Ether murmured, nodding. You're talking about what you did on Watatsumi Island, aren't you? Rimuru nodded. Paimon floated up slightly. Well, that's definitely an interesting idea, she muttered, rubbing her chin. A, however, remained skeptical. Explain in more detail. Rimuru sighed and leaned forward. What I mean is that if they ever attack and try to destroy Inazuma, I can transport the entire nation inside my personal space and keep it safe there. Miko and A exchanged glances, their expressions showing confusion. Are you saying that you have a space similar to the plane of Eutimia? Miko asked, her tone uncertain. Rimuru nodded. Yes. The difference is that my space has infinite room, meaning I can store an entire nation inside without issue. A frowned slightly, glancing at Miko before turning back to Rimuru. But what if they find out that Inazuma is inside your personal space? Would they not try to force their way in? Rimuru shook his head. That's impossible. I have absolute control over my personal space. No matter who it is, they cannot enter without my permission. In that space, I hold absolute authority, you could even say I'm an omnipotent entity within it. A and Miko both took a moment to process the implications of that statement. For the first time since the conversation started, A's tense posture relaxed ever so slightly. That's reassuring, A admitted. However, Miko wasn't fully convinced yet. But what would happen if you were killed? Wouldn't your personal space cease to exist along with you? A's gaze snapped back to Rimuru, awaiting his answer. Rimuru chuckled lightly. That's a fair concern. But the thing is, I can't be killed. A's eyes narrowed slightly. So, you're immortal. Rimuru sighed. It's not just about immortality in the sense of not aging. A tilted her head slightly. Then what do you mean? Rimuru leaned back, crossing his arms. Even if someone were to completely destroy my body, I would still survive. My soul and consciousness cannot be destroyed, so killing me is simply impossible. Miko's ears twitched slightly. And what makes you so sure of that? Rimuru smirked slightly. Because after studying about this world and its elemental powers and actually using them and then meeting with the Archons and seeing their powers, I can say one thing for sure, that the world I came from, the central world, is far stronger than Teyvat. If some of my friends were to come to this world, their mere presence alone could erase Teyvat entirely. So I'm certain that the heavenly principles are far weaker compared to the beings from my world. A and Miko's eyes widened at the sheer scale of what Rimuru was saying. A hesitated for a moment before asking, but if that's the case, why aren't you that strong? Rimuru's expression turned slightly wry. It's not that I'm not strong. It's just that my powers are currently sealed. Miko's ears perked up, her expression shifting to one of surprise. Wait, are you saying that when you fought A, you weren't even using your full power? Rimuru nodded. That's right. You could even say that what A fought wasn't even a small fraction of one of my abilities. A gulped slightly, processing what that meant. Miko, on the other hand, muttered to herself, just how can someone be this powerful? Rimuru smiled faintly. There are many things outside this world that are far beyond the imagination of the people of Teyvat. A then asked the most pressing question on her mind. Then, why are your powers sealed? Rimuru sighed before giving a brief explanation about his battle with Ivaraj and Feldway, how they had fought, and how, in the end, they sealed each other's abilities, leading to all three of them falling into this world. As he finished his explanation, silence filled the plain of Eutimia. A and Miko exchanged glances, realizing that the man in front of them was far beyond anything they had imagined. A finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. If what you say is true, then I may have severely underestimated you. Miko leaned forward, a fox-like smile playing on her lips. Now this is getting interesting. Rimuru simply smirked. So, now that you know the truth, what do you think, A? A kept her piercing gaze locked onto Rimuru, her tone unwavering. You understand that the heavenly principles are not ordinary entities. They govern life, death, time, and space itself. You claim to be able to protect Inazuma from such forces, but are you truly certain? Rimuru's playful demeanor faded into something more serious. His golden eyes sharpened as he answered, I think you're underestimating me again. A's brows furrowed slightly, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The things you mentioned, time, space, life, and death, were insignificant to beings like me, who have already transcended such concepts. I don't just manipulate them, they no longer hold meaning for me. Paimon gasped, floating closer. Wait, you mean you've actually transcended time, space, life, and death? Rimuru gave a small nod. Paimon's eyes sparkled with excitement as she flailed her tiny arms. That's so cool. Does that mean you can move and stop time? Rimuru smirked. Yes, I can. But there are even cooler things I can do. Paimon's excitement doubled as she clapped her hands. Ooh, Paimon wants to see that too. Rimuru chuckled at her enthusiasm. Well, I'll definitely show you, after I break this seal of mine. Paimon grinned widely, tilting her head. Promise. Rimuru playfully ruffled her hair. I promise. Paimon giggled happily, completely unfazed by the serious conversation happening around her. Meanwhile, A glanced at Miko, her expression unreadable. Then, what do you think? Miko placed a finger on her lips, her fox-like grin never fading as she regarded Rimuru with amusement. If what he says is true, then this would be a tremendous help. But, are you really telling the truth? Rimuru chuckled. Oh. You're doubting me now. Miko smirked. I am a kitsune, you know. Tricksters like me tend to be cautious when someone claims to be all-powerful. Rimuru leaned forward slightly. Then tell me, what kind of proof do you want? Miko's playful expression turned thoughtful for a moment before she smiled again. How about a sparring match with A? But, not just anywhere. You claim that your personal space grants you absolute control. If that's true, then you should be able to completely dominate A in battle, without even trying. A's expression didn't change, but there was a slight shift in her posture. She clearly hadn't expected Miko to suggest such a thing, but she didn't protest either. She simply studied Rimuru, waiting for his answer. Rimuru didn't even hesitate. Sure, let's go. Miko raised an eyebrow. You agreed pretty fast. Rimuru grinned. I don't make empty boasts. Shall we? A finally spoke, her voice calm and composed. Very well. Ether, who had been silent until now, leaned toward Rimuru. Are you sure about this? I mean, A is no pushover. Rimuru smirked. Don't worry. If things go as planned, she won't even get the chance to move. Ether blinked. Wait, what? Before anyone could say anything else, Rimuru raised his hand. Mental command. Seal. Seal. Yes, master. On it. The moment those words echoed in his mind, the space around them twisted and distorted, as if the very fabric of reality was being unraveled and reformed at his command. The serene atmosphere of the plain of Eutimia shattered like a broken mirror, and suddenly, they were no longer in the plain of Eutimia. They had entered Rimuru's domain. As the group stepped into Rimuru's personal domain, the scenery around them shifted into an ethereal and otherworldly expanse. The ground beneath them shimmered like an endless, sparkling ocean, reflecting light in a way that made it appear as though they were standing on the surface of a liquid gemstone. Yet, despite its appearance, it was completely solid beneath their feet, supporting them as naturally as the land of Teyvat itself. Above them, the sky was a brilliant, endless blue, devoid of clouds, stretching infinitely with a sense of serenity and tranquility. It was unlike any sky they had seen before, as if they were standing at the very center of creation itself. A and Miko scanned their surroundings in silent fascination. Then, in the distance, a house came into view. Ether and Paimon, who had already visited Rimuru's domain multiple times before, immediately broke into a run towards the house. Near the entrance of the house, two figures sat together on a wooden bench. One was a tall male figure, his presence imposing and dignified. The other was a beautiful female, gently stroking the male's head with a rare softness in her expression. As they got closer, A narrowed her eyes, feeling an overwhelming pressure from the two individuals. Their immense energy signature was impossible to ignore. She turned to Rimuru. Who are they? Before Rimuru could answer, Miko's fox-like eyes widened in recognition. Oh my, isn't that the ancient gods from Liu, Ojal and Basht? She mused, fanning herself lightly. I met them back on Yashiori Island. Rimuru nodded. You're correct. A's gaze sharpened. What are they doing here? Rimuru gave a small chuckle. Well, after their defeat in Liu, I decided to give them another chance. Rather than leaving them to fade away, I brought them here. Now, they live in my domain. As they approached the two, Rimuru reached out and tapped Ojal's shoulder. The moment Ojal turned, everyone's eyes widened. His cheeks were swollen, making his once intimidating face look utterly ridiculous. PFF'd, Paimon barely stopped herself from laughing. Rimuru's expression turned to shock. What the hell happened to your face? Basht flinched slightly, looking away as if she were hiding something. Before she could respond, Seal materialized beside them, her sudden appearance catching A and Miko completely off guard. Ciel's voice was calm as always. It's nothing you should worry about, Master. Rimuru narrowed his eyes. Seal, tell me what happened. Seal remained completely unfazed, her expression unreadable. Nothing, Master. Rimuru sighed, already suspecting something was being hidden from him. Are you hiding the cause of this? Silence. Rimuru turned his gaze back to Ojal, who was visibly hesitating. Deciding to take action, Rimuru placed a hand over Ojal's swollen face, using his magic to instantly heal him. Ojal stood up immediately, looking relieved, but his face quickly turned into one of pure panic as he realized what he had just done. Rimuru, I swear, nothing happened. Everything is fine. It's just that Master Seal told me that if I... Wham! Before he could finish, Seal appeared behind him and delivered a devastating punch to the back of his head. Ojal's entire head was sent crashing into the ground, creating a small crater as his upper body was buried underground. Basht, seeing this, immediately tried to help him out. You idiot, do you even think before you speak? She scolded, desperately pulling at his massive form. Rimuru, watching the chaotic scene unfold, sighed deeply and turned back toward A and Miko. He let out an awkward laugh. Well, we should probably discuss this later. Let's get started with the match. A simply nodded, remaining composed. Miko, on the other hand, grinned mischievously, clearly entertained by the absurd display she had just witnessed. However, her sharp fox-like eyes flickered toward Ojal, as if committing this scene to memory for later amusement. After some time, everyone gathered in a wide-open area within Rimuru's domain. Ojal, still rubbing his head from Ciel's punch, sat with Basht near the edge of the battlefield, watching in silence. At the very center, Ciel stepped forward and looked at both combatants. If the contestants are ready. Rimuru, standing casually with his hands in his pockets, gave a relaxed nod. Yeah, I'm ready. A, on the other hand, gripped Musou Ishin tightly, her stance exuding pure focus. She gave a small nod of confirmation. Seal raised her hand. Then, begin. She vanished from the battlefield. Crack! A thunderous explosion of electro-energy erupted from A as she launched herself at Rimuru, her blade blurring through the air at a speed too fast for the human eye to follow. Her sword, Musou Ishin, was mere millimeters from Rimuru's chest in an instant. But then, she stopped. Her entire body froze in place. The lightning surrounding her disappeared. Time itself had ceased for her alone. Miko's eyes widened in shock. She had expected Rimuru to do something powerful, but this. Paimon blinked. Wait. What just happened? A's not moving. Ether sighed. You should have gotten used to it by now. Rimuru, unfazed, snapped his fingers. The air twisted and distorted around A's frozen form, and time itself began to rewind. Her body moved backwards, her sword retracting, her feet stepping in reverse, until she was right back at her starting position, as if the match had never even begun. Then, time resumed. A blinked, confused. Before she could react, Rimuru was already behind her. She sensed him at the last moment and immediately launched forward again. But, she landed, and Rimuru was gone. She turned, looking around for him, but she couldn't sense his presence. Miko, who had been watching closely, finally understood. I see now. She raised her voice. Okay, that's enough. A turned toward her. But the match just started. Miko shook her head, crossing her arms. No, A. You've already lost. A frowned, confused, until she suddenly felt cold steel pressing against the back of her neck. Slowly, she turned her head. Behind her, Rimuru stood calmly, holding a katana. The tip of the blade was already at her neck, positioned to end the fight instantly. She blinked. She looked back at where Rimuru had been standing. He was gone. He had moved behind her and stopped time, thrice. A long silence filled the battlefield. A finally exhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a moment before speaking. Yes, indeed, you were right, Miko. She lowered her weapon. I lost. Rimuru gave a satisfied smile as he unsheathed his katana, the blade disappearing back into his personal storage. Well then, he said casually, I think that settles it. As the match ended and the energy in the air settled, A sheathed Musou Ishin and turned toward Rimuru, her violet eyes filled with curiosity. What did you actually do? She asked, her tone serious but tinged with intrigue. Rimuru simply grinned, placing his hands behind his head in a relaxed posture. Why don't you ask Miko? She knows exactly what happened. A turned her gaze toward Miko, who had been observing the match with a knowing smirk. Miko, seeing A's expectant look, chuckled and tapped her chin thoughtfully. Well, if I had to describe it simply, he didn't move fast, he stopped time only for you. A's brows furrowed slightly as she processed the information. Are you saying that he wasn't using immense speed but rather, just freezing me in place and moving freely? Miko nodded, amusement dancing in her eyes. Yes, exactly, A. The moment you lunged at him, you suddenly froze midair, completely motionless. At first, I thought he had dodged at an unimaginable speed, but that wasn't the case. He was walking, casually, as if time itself didn't apply to him. A's expression shifted as she absorbed Miko's words. And when I suddenly found myself back at my starting position. Miko's smile deepened. He reversed your entire movement to where you stood at the beginning. It was as if the battle never even started. A heavy silence filled the space. A turned back to Rimuru, her gaze thoughtful. So, you weren't lying after all. Rimuru shrugged. Of course not. Why would I lie about that? A exhaled deeply, her arms crossed. That's certainly reassuring in a way. But then, her expression became serious again. However, I still have a question. Rimuru tilted his head. Go ahead. A's eyes darkened slightly as she looked directly into his. If you ever turned against us, we would have no way of fighting back. Your power is too absolute. At her words, the atmosphere grew tense. Paimon, who had been floating nearby, quickly interjected. But why would Rimuru do that? He's a good guy. Ether, who had been silently listening, also nodded. I agree. Rimuru has had plenty of chances to do whatever he wanted, but he hasn't. If he had any ill intentions, he wouldn't be standing here trying to help us. Rimuru looked at A, his expression calm. Well, first of all, I have no reason to do that, he said, his tone steady. And second, if you really want assurance, we can form a contract to solidify our alliance. A's eyes flickered with interest. A contract? Yes. It can be an unbreakable pact, one that ensures I'll never harm you or your people unless you betray me first, Rimuru explained. But aside from that, I can't do anything more to prove myself. In the end, you'll have to choose to believe in me. Then, his eyes turned sharp. Just like you're doing now with the heavenly principles. A's breath hitched slightly. She hadn't expected him to say that. She was trusting the heavenly principles, an entity she had never even seen, to dictate the fate of Teyvat. If she could trust something that had only shown indifference toward her people, then why was it so hard to trust Rimuru, who was offering to stand by their side? A realization struck her, but before she could voice it, she thought of something else. Aren't you mad? A asked, her voice softer. Rimuru raised an eyebrow. About what? A turned to Ether, then back to Rimuru. Your friend here almost died because of me. At that moment, a heavy silence filled the air. Ether remained still, his golden eyes unreadable. Everyone turned to Rimuru, waiting for his response. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, he exhaled. To be honest, he said, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. I was mad. Super mad. His normally relaxed expression turned serious. I consider every friend of mine as family. When someone hurts them, I don't just sit back and let it happen. The air grew heavier. But we all saw what happened when I let my anger take over, didn't we? His eyes met A's. I don't want the same thing to happen again. A felt a strange pang in her chest at his words. There was something deeper behind them, something personal. Then why are you still here? She asked quietly. Rimuru smiled, but this time, it wasn't his usual playful smirk. It was gentle. Because, despite everything, I'm still just a slime who wants to live his life as peacefully as possible, without a single worry in the world. A was stunned by the simplicity of his words. And that's why I'm here, Rimuru continued. Because I want the same for you. He took a step forward and extended his hand toward A. If you truly want to free yourself from the heavenly principles, I can help. His voice was filled with sincerity. I'm offering you my hand in friendship. A stared at his outstretched hand, her heart pounding slightly. With me on your side, you'll be able to live freely, with your people. The weight of his words settled over her. For the first time in centuries, she wondered, was it truly possible? Could she finally be free from the chains that bound her? She looked at his hand again. And slowly, she began to reach out. As A's hand met Rimuru's, their handshake was firm, sealing the agreement between them. The air around them seemed to shift, as if something significant had just taken place, an unspoken understanding, a bond of trust between two powerful beings. Rimuru's lips curled into a small yet satisfied smile. Looks like we have a deal, he said in a calm, confident tone. Then, with a simple flick of his wrist, a stack of neatly bound papers materialized out of thin air in his palm. The document glowed faintly before settling into reality, giving off a strange yet authoritative presence. He extended it toward A. These are the documents, or rather, the contract, that we just talked about, he explained. It includes all the terms of our agreement, covering every detail thoroughly. Take your time and read through it carefully before making a final decision. A reached out and took the papers from him, her violet eyes scanning the first few lines. Even without reading much, she could tell that the contract was exceptionally well structured, almost too perfect. Every word carried a weight of precision, ensuring absolute fairness between both parties. She looked up at Rimuru, who simply smiled. From the side, Ye Miko observed the exchange with her usual playful smirk. With her arms crossed, she let out a small hum before speaking in a teasing tone. Well, it looks like you've gained yourself a new and powerful ally, eh? How exciting. A sighed, tucking the contract under her arm as if bracing herself for what was coming next. Indeed, she admitted. Miko's smirk widened as she tilted her head slightly. Now then, I assume you'll be needing my help to go through that contract. A's gaze flickered toward her, her expression unreadable. Miko's fox-like ears twitched slightly as she continued, "Oh my, don't tell me, after spending so much time in your plane of euthymia, you've actually forgotten how to read." A moment of silence passed. A's stare remained calm, but there was something in her gaze, something that silently said, "I know exactly what you're trying to do, Miko." Miko chuckled softly. "Oh, don't look at me like that. I'm merely concerned about Inazuma's future." She placed a delicate hand on her hip before adding, "But I suppose I'll lend you a hand. After all, this contract will decide the fate of your nation." A let out a small sigh but gave a firm nod. She wasn't one to rely on others for matters like this, but she trusted Miko's insight. If anything, having a second pair of eyes would only make things easier. Turning her attention back to Rimuru, she met his gaze. "I will inform you once I've finished reading through this," she said with a composed expression. Rimuru gave a small, easygoing nod. "Sounds good. Take your time." With that, the conversation came to a close. Though nothing had physically changed in the world just yet, a new path had been set in motion, one that would determine the future of Inazuma and its people. For the first time in a long while, the nation of eternity had taken a step forward.